Thank you. Bom dia. Tudo bem? Perfect. That's all my Portuguese, I'm sorry. That's all I have. The first two talks we heard today, I heard the expression several times, I hope, we hope, we hope, we hope, we hope. But one of the things I believe in very strongly is hope is not a strategy. And so we have to find how are we going to do things, find some ways to do it. Are you going to find that I'm going to talk about, for the next little while, some ideas about how we can bring ourselves forward a little bit. Because these changes are wonderful to think about, but they do not happen by accident. We have to create them. We're all managers of organizations. What are we going to do? How can we move it forward? How long is it going to take us? And that's why the question, is your organization mature enough to really do business process management? And I want to re-emphasize what Alberto said right at the beginning. It's the M. The M is not modeling. The M is management. And so therefore, we have to see it, the whole process from beginning to end, and make sure we can bring it all together and manage the dots, connect the dots together. So we have to basically make sure all those pieces actually work together, and we go forward from there. So that's really what I'm going to talk about a little bit. I could take this one presentation and speak to you for 2 days. I'm so passionate about the ideas. But I'm going to hit some of the highlights along the way, and hopefully during the day, if you have any questions, I'd be really, really happy to speak some more to you about all of that. So first of all, I'm going to talk about very, very basic, first of all, how do we think about business processes? Because in my experience, people use the word business process all the time and have no idea what a business process is in the first place. And the key word there is business process, not IT process, not system process, not my activity at my desk. It's the business process, the processes of the business. And then I want to talk about how do we think about business process management, the management aspects over those business processes. And I'm going to touch on another thing, which is the maturity of organizations. We're talking about today, are you mature enough? Well, we have to talk about what do we mean by maturity. What is maturity? How can we identify where we are and where we would like to go and where we would like to be with regard to all of this? And then I'm going to touch on something else called governance. It's a very hot topic these days. Governance. People use governance all over the place. But again, it's not really clear what we mean by governance. What I mean by governance is the management of management. If you think about it, it's all the rules, policies, processes, systems that you use to let managers know how to manage, to have consistency along the way, or the appropriate degree of rigor and flexibility. And there's some place in the middle that's right for you. You have to find your own, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we communicate the message, and then I'll conclude from there. So first of all, how to think about business processes. Very consistent with Anne-Marie's talk, we have something that says the organization's business processes clearly describe the work performed by all resources, systems, people, equipment, involved in creating outcomes, not outputs, outcomes, results that are valuable to them, of value for customers and other stakeholders. What that says is it's all the work we do to create results for people who don't work inside our organizations. They're outside our organizations. The only reason those processes are there is to create those results. And this is all part of something that I worked on up till about 2 years ago. It took about 3 years to do it, though. And there's something called the Business Process Manifesto. Much like the business rules manifestos and other things like that, the Business Process Manifesto was about 100 people working around the world, and I coordinated all these different people arguing over what do the words mean, what are the concepts, and how do we bring them all together. And this has had very, very good response around the world, and people are now using it to establish how do they talk about processes. One of the things I think is very, very important is how do we actually communicate with each other to use the words about business processes so we can actually be on the same page. Fortunately now, this is now available. It's a free download from bptrends.com, and it's available in 14 languages. I'm not sure it's available in Portuguese. I do know it's available in Brazilian Portuguese. So my understanding is that's a little different than Portuguese, but you can pull it, you can download it and see if it works for you. So there is a version for you which you might be able to use. So it's important we have something to start with. Now, another thing I want to talk about is this idea that the business processes, along the same lines that we were just talking about, business processes over here, whoops, there's only 3 buttons and I still got it wrong. Okay, so I'm not sure what's going on. So business processes actually start over here, for example, with a customer. And this is our organization. And the customer's out on the outside of this organization, and they cannot see inside. Matter of fact, you don't want them to see inside. If they know the inside of your organization, then there's something fundamentally wrong, because it means they're the ones managing the process, not you. I had this great experience a number of years ago, as a story anyway, when my computer broke. And so I thought, well, I need to take it in. So I went to the service center, and I took it in and said, my computer is broken. Can you fix it? And they said, absolutely, we can fix it. What is your authorization number? I said, well, what is an authorization number? I don't understand. They said, oh, no. Did you talk to customer service? I said, no. Oh, you have to talk to customer service because they can give you an authorization number. So I said, well, can you give me an authorization number? Oh, no. That's customer service department. They have to do that. Great. So they said, here's a number, go on phone. So I went around the corner, got on my mobile phone, dialed in the number, and waited 20 minutes. And all the time when I'm on the phone waiting for customer service, I was hearing customer service announcements. Which means to me, if I'm hearing about customer service, I'm not getting any. So that was a really important lesson to learn. I finally got through, and they said, how can we help you? So I explained the problem. They said, what is the model number? What is the serial number? And they asked me all these questions about what's your name, what's your address. I said, but I registered this under the warranty. Don't you have that information already? Oh, no, that's a different department. That's in their database. We don't have access to that information, so let me take it again. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm already counting the number of databases where my name and address and contact information is sitting, knowing that none of them are coordinated. And if I ever change anything, I'm never going to get them all updated, right? So I'm thinking, when you do this work, you're always analyzing everybody else's processes, even as a customer. So, then they said, well, so I gave them all the information. They said, what's your problem? I explained it. And they said, oh, you have 2 problems, not 1. You'll have to talk to somebody else first before we can give you an authorization number. I said, well, what am I going to do? They said, don't worry, sir, we'll transfer you. So they transferred me over to another department. Now, guess where I go in the queue, in the waiting? Do I go to the top of the queue because I'm already in the process? Oh, no. I'm now starting somebody else's process. I'm now at the bottom. 15 more minutes, more announcements. I finally get through. And I said, well, they said, what is your name? What is the model number? What is the serial number? Same. I said, it's okay. I've got a reference number, a file number from the other guys. I said, oh, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have access to that system. Again. And then finally they sent me back, and I got close to the end, and I started to get happy. And the reason I got happy was I then realized all I'm getting is an authorization number, but I came in here to get my computer fixed. So I hadn't even started the process I came in for yet, and I was being dragged through all of this. What was I doing? I did it again. I was navigating their organization chart, and the only person making that process work was who? Me. You've all had this experience. You have it all the time with the airlines, with the phone companies, with your bank, with everybody, with the government. You all have these experiences all the time. To me, it's the end. To back around to me, that's a business process. And when I told this story at a conference one time, I had these 2 ladies come up to me at the break time, and they said, you know the story you told? I said, yes. They said, that was us, wasn't it? And I looked down at the badge. It was remarkable. It was them. And they said to me, luckily I did not use their name. But they said to me, oh, well, we don't have a process for that. And my response immediately was, oh, yes, you do. It just sucks. My point here about the story is you always have a process for that. So when we talk, people say about processes, they're there whether you like it or not. They exist whether you like it or not. You have to meet the needs and expectations of your customers and the other stakeholders too, because they've got processes going on, whether you like it or not. So this idea about should we use processes is not a question. You have to. And if you don't manage them, somebody else will, and they're going to tell all their friends, like I told the whole conference room of people at that time, they're going to tell everybody else about this bad experience. And next time, they're going to buy a different machine, as I did next time. I would not even consider that company for the next purchase. So we have this going on all the time. So this is an important thing to remember. The processes exist. And one of the challenges we're facing is it's really, really complicated. Now, it can be complex, which means you understand it, or it can be complicated, meaning you don't. And most of the time, we don't really understand it very particularly well. But what we've got going on here is we've got all the people on the outside we have to serve. And the processes will flow all the way through. But we also have our organizational goals, our strategy statements are made, and somehow magically that's supposed to show up in the work that we do. And we also have all these resources, technology, people, which somehow have to play in the execution of these processes. How do we connect this up? It's hard. It's really, really hard. If you don't have something to organize the work, and it is the work of people, of groups of people, if you don't have something to organize or synchronize that, good luck. And I can't do it by having the IT department do their thing and the HR department doing their thing and somebody else doing something else. It's not going to happen that way. Well, you have to synchronize it, and the synchronization comes through business processes, whether you like it or not. You can choose to do it, or you can ignore it and sub-optimize the whole set of things that we're trying to do. So that's going to be key. So a couple of these pieces I'll go through a bit more quickly, but in this particular one here, all I'm really saying is you need to describe, at least name what those processes are going to be. And there's processes here, first of all, there's core processes. Core processes are very simply the ones that deal with your customers and the ones that you're there to deal with. The people who are the recipients of your service, those services that touch them are core. By the way, sometimes when you list out your processes, and you see processes out there, and people in the room get very scared because they're not in the core. Here's the best example. Finance always wants to be in the core because they think they're important, and they confuse core with important. Yes, they're important, but we're not here to do finance. We're doing finance because we're here, if that makes any sense, right? So it's the same thing with a lot of other things. We also have guiding processes. The things which set the direction and the strategies and the plans and monitor and they control and keep things on track. We also have other processes which enable. So the technology and the human resource things, they give us all the resources we need in order to do the core. But make no mistake about it, we will succeed on the core. If we're not good at the core, we're not going to win. And all the other processes should be there to help the core be better. And if you're internal, for example, you're in an internal IT department, your job is to make your customers successful. Not only to do it for yourself, not only to meet your service level agreement, but it's actually make a difference in how the business actually operates. And I'm not going to go through this, but it's just an example of what this might look like. It's just, for example, I develop the product or service. I create the product or service. I optimize it. I win new customers. I transact business. I basically manage the relationships and so on, going all the way through. And all these enabling things at the bottom about human resources, planning, and so on. You need something, at least, some sort of what we call a process architecture or taxonomy, which basically says, this is the work that we do. Now, what's nice about this is that this is completely independent of your organization chart. This has nothing to do with your organization chart. You can reorganize 55,000 different ways, and this is still true, unless you change your business. Unless you change your business. So quite often we see process models built around the organization. I hate it. Because what it does, it perpetuates the organization, even if the organization is not right. Think about the work. Think about the value that's created. as we go through all of this. Okay, this is just another little thing I think is important. How you name your processes is very, very important to me. So what this says is, and this is in English, I'm not sure how this translates to Portuguese, but my understanding is it still works, that a business process is described by an active verb noun. No nouns. In other words, and the purpose of the process should be in the name. So I should never have a name that says take the order. I should always have a name that says fulfill the order. The result of the process should be in the process name. So you can see what the process is trying to do. Just simple communication. So we can all see the results of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, a couple of other rules with this is that this means that, again, in English, there's no ings in process. Marketing is not a process. Engineering is not a process. It's a function. It's a group of things. Procurement is not a process. Acquire goods and services is a process. See what I'm saying? So otherwise we get this mixed up. And this is a big battle. I see process architecture diagrams all the time that break all of these rules. And here's another thing to watch out for. Good names are important. This is a name I try to avoid. Manage something. Manage human resources. What is that? Can I see? Okay, one of the ways to test this is to flip the words around. So for example, acquire goods and services, flip it around. Goods and services acquired, that's the result. Manage human resources managed, what is that? I don't know what that is. What that tells me is there's a lot of other things that are really taking place underneath. So as professionals, we need to make sure we communicate what we're trying to accomplish in the names that we use. So just be a little bit careful about that. Also, handle something, do something. Somebody said to me once, you won't let me use the word the accounting process. No, you can't use that. So, can I call it do accounting? No. Give me a result. Give me something that I can actually work with. So this is actually really quite important. It's quite consistent with the manifesto as well, actually. So that's just sort of a bit of a, how do we think about some of this stuff? I want to talk a little bit about how do we think about business process management. At BP Trends, every 2 years we do a survey. And you can download the survey free if you go online. This survey says, what are people thinking about? What are they doing? The people doing business process work, what are they doing? And how do they think about it? Now, we basically have a small group down here, 13%, and this has gotten smaller actually over the years, who think about it as only a set of technologies. Business process management systems, workflow systems, that you can actually pass the work around the organization. And it's the implementation of the technology. Now, with all due respect to the technology vendors, they love to have you think about the technology as being BPM. But the M has got nothing to do with the technology. The technology can help you by giving you good information so you can manage, but by itself, not good enough. So some people think it's about technology. Some people think it's about saving money. I've got a problem, go in there and fix it, do a project, clean it up, lean it out, those types of things. They think it's about doing a project to solve a specific problem. But more and more, we're seeing people sort of step up the maturity curve. A systematic approach for improving and managing a process. Systematic approach, a method or a process for process, if you want to think about it from that point of view. But now we're seeing people are starting to say it's now a top-down method designed to organize, manage, and measure the organization based upon the organization's processes. What that says, the last one there says it's not business process management. It's management by process. That's a big, big difference. It's the management by process. I manage the results. I measure the results. I have people accountable for the results. I have teams working for those results. And I don't have this issue where a manager is measured on one thing, but the outcome is something altogether different. That's a big issue, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. So we're seeing that people are starting to pay attention to that. They understand it. Now, not everybody is there yet in terms of their capability, but hopefully we'll get them there. Again, at BP Trends, we just have this another way of looking at it, our pyramid, where basically we say we have IT development, human resource development, specific process improvement, but then the enterprise level is business strategy, process architecture, performance management, business architecture in general, governance and planning. So this is really where the management aspect comes in. But it takes a while. You have to be mature to do that well. And quite often what people do is they start by doing process improvement, and that's great, you still have to do it, but then after a while they realize all these processes touch each other and they send things to each other. So we have to be better at coordinating all of them as a set of things. So we start to manage ourselves that particular way. And this is just a bit more detail, but all it really says here is at the top level, the enterprise level, the business strategy, the process architecture, the performance measures tied to the process results, and the alignment of the capabilities. All the resources you have put in place are connected up to the reason why we do things. I would loosely call this business architecture. Hopefully, hopefully Mike at the back will agree with me. Oh, 2 thumbs up. Thank you, Mike. And then, of course, here, process improvement and resource development. But really, the process-based management is the governance over all of this. So BPM is not just about projects. Yes, you will do projects. It's about the day-to-day management of the organization, using process measurement as feedback and having managers accountable for those process results. That's turning the organization on the side. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have to get ready to be able to do that stuff. Now, in doing this, one of the things to think about is that business processes here, which give you performance, also have to deal with information, they have to deal with knowledge, they have to deal with strategy, they have to deal with policies, they have to deal with skills and competencies and attitudes and cultures and behaviors. They have to do with technologies, your physical infrastructure, and your org chart. So the business process is the organizer of those things. Why? Because it's the thing that can be measured. The reason by the way, these business processes are not going away. It took, in my study as an industrial engineer, I learned it took almost 200 years for the Industrial Revolution to really stick. It started in the middle 1700s, and it wasn't until we got into the 1900s we got to be good at it, just in time to throw it away, that particular model. So the revolution we're in now, we're just at the beginning. It's going to take us a while. It's going to take us a little while, and we're on the beginning of the journey. And as Anne-Marie said before, many organizations won't make it. They will not make it. They will fail. Alberto said the same thing. So, but my point here is that when you think about business processes and you try to do something about them, you have to include everything else around the outside. It's not just the workflow. It's everything else. If I have a bunch of really, really stupid business rules that make absolutely no sense, that's going to mess up my process. If I have people who are measured on something different than the outcome, that's going to mess up my process. So you have to synchronize this. When we're actually looking at the management of the process, you have to include everything else in the coordination. And it has to be basically brought together this way. So let's talk a little bit about maturity then. I'm sure you've seen in the past a lot of maturity models. Matter of fact, Brad Power, one of the Babson College in the United States, has discovered over 100 different maturity models. And a lot of them are like 300 pages of description. I would say that if you got going that far, it's just far, far too much for you. So what you really need to do is keep it simple. This is just more of a CMMI, capability maturity model type of process maturity. When it really looks something like this, level 1 says, do it yourself. Everybody does it their own way. I got a problem, go fix it. Next manager comes in, they do it a different way. And all around the organization, we're all doing it our own way. It's sounding familiar, I can tell, right? This sounds familiar. Okay? The next one is, I get it a bit more repeatable. And it's really a bit more about process improvement. I have ways, and that's where Six Sigma and Lean sort of tend to play very, very nicely at that particular level. They're really good techniques to help you with those things. You need it. But basically, we tend to do projects and process improvement. Level 3 is now, I'm much more about the architecture. That architecture diagram I talked about, you need one of those. You need to be able to describe how all the pieces fit together. Level 4, and also define the measurements you need. Level 4 is a big, big step. Level 4 says, I now start to use those measures and I manage those processes by having that data coming back to managers who then make adjustments based upon the measurement data of whole processes. That means getting managers to manage differently. And that's a very, very big cultural step up. And you may not be able to do all of it at once. I'm sure you can't. You have to go. Level 5, that's just nirvana. We'd all love to be there. And I think I probably know of about 5 companies in the world who are at that level at this point in time. So we're all striving to get there, but we're on this journey. Now, this is what we call the structural maturity model. There's another model, because you can get up, you can try to work your way up here and fall back and fall back and fall back. Why is that? It's because you don't have the cultural maturity to adopt a higher level of structural maturity, if that makes sense. So in other words, you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it. And what it really looks like is that down, I'm not going to go through all the details, but down at the bottom here, people do things because they're told to do it. And there's a supervisory control system that says, if you don't do this, your evaluation is going to be affected, and so on. But as you get to more culturally mature, people do it because they know it's the right thing to do. They believe in it. They behave that way. It's in their blood, and they want to do it. And so crawling up that curve is something that's really, really hard. And any change you put in, at the beginning, you do have to monitor. You do have to coach. You do have to support people in all of that journey. After a while, they'll coach each other. They'll support each other. They'll help each other. And it won't be critical. It'll be supportive. And so that's what more culturally mature when it comes to business processes. So really what we're saying here is that you can work on the structural level and you can look at the cultural level. And the real maturity is how they actually come together. So in here, if I'm trying for this to be very well structured, all the right tools are in place, all the right mechanisms are there, I put my measurement system in, and yet my managers are basically down here, and if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. Guess what? I've seen this happen so many times. BPM programs that go in, we put all the right tools in place, all the right things in place, and it dies. Why? Because the executives will kill it. And they will not kill it actively, they'll just watch it die. I'm sure you've seen that. And then you're all sitting there saying, I don't understand, this is so logical, it makes so much sense, the company would be so much better off. But those managers and those executives, you're challenging their beliefs, you're challenging their behaviors, you're challenging how they think, you're challenging how they're measured. And so really what we have to try to do here is, if this is the case, start working on your cultural maturity. And if you're, by the way, if you're over here and you're very culturally mature and you don't have the tools, that's great, because now I can bring the tools up and it's more easily adopted and accepted. So this is a big, big challenge in organizations to pull these 2 points of view together. So we always like to do an assessment of both of those to see where you're going to be. So this is really what we're going for then. We're saying then that I can have a current maturity level, I can have an organizational readiness which is a bit more than that, but the desired maturity is even more than that. What am I going to do? How do I tackle the different scenarios here? Now, if you have an organization where the desired maturity is very much in sync with their readiness for it, then this is fantastic. I've had lots of discussions recently with a very large Australian bank, and they've just implemented incredible new set of technologies. But they've now realized, and they're probably one of the best in the world, but what they're saying now is that they're not going to work for them unless they change how the bank runs, unless they change how they think. And they're committing this whole bank, one of the top 10 banks in the world, they're committing the whole bank to go through a major 5-year change to process management. They're ready. And that's fantastic. And I want to help them because that's fun. Right? That's a lot of fun. So that's one thing that we can do. Now, if you are in this situation where the readiness is not quite there, but it's better than where you are today, go like crazy to get even, and then gradually move yourself forward. It's a long journey going forward. And the last of these I'm going to show you is when you're only ready for what you've got. How do you actually move that forward? Well, it's a very, very tough journey to move it forward. You're going to have to move in small increments. Pull the structural level, and then from that, move the cultural level. I think you always have to have something to aim for when you change the culture towards what? And it is, I'm going to go back to what Anne-Marie said before, it's Peter Senge who wrote The Fifth Discipline. Okay, and Peter, and I was at a presentation in 1990 when I started this journey of mine, the same time as them, and he gave this talk. The book wasn't published yet, and he said an organization has a built-in resistance, and it's like having an elastic band. And what you have here is, you're here, you're trying to go there. So what you're doing is you're trying to pull this elastic band, but it's got this resistance that's built in. I'm not going to hurt you, sir. But it's got this resistance that's built in, and you can only go so far, okay? But then what you got to do is, then you have to pull yourself here, and then maybe go here, and then maybe go there, but you always never forget where you're trying to go, so you're pulling it forward. But if that's your organization, that's going to be tough. Or is your organization more like this, where I can actually really go far, and I can go and pull on larger chunks? So you've got to figure out what the right path is. There's no sort of really well-defined, predetermined, absolute set of steps forward. But the organizations I've seen that have made it have taken 5 to 10 years to do so, to change the behavior, change the culture. But if you never start, you'll never get there. And that's part of the journey. So you have to be patient while you're making these changes happen. I'm not going to talk about that. So now let's think a little bit about governance. This is a bit of a complicated page, but I'll just work you through it fairly quickly. What does this say? This says, I've got a customer, they have a need, we conduct an instance of the process just for them, and they get their result, right? Who's doing that? Someone who's responsible for the execution. Maybe somebody in the call center takes the call, takes it all the way through. Now, they have a manager for that call center, say, and that manager is making sure that everyone's doing the work the way they're supposed to do the work, right? The coordinating things and so on. Now, out of the result of this, there's two other things that happen. One is, are my tools working? Do my systems work? Are my people trained? But also, I also have performance data. And this is what we're missing. When we design processes today, we don't design the measurement system that should go along with the process. We have to do that. It's a requirement. Nobody in the business asks for it, but it's there in order to have the management system working. In addition to that, what can we do better? That should be built right into the loop and coming out of that. Now, out of all of that, I actually now have something that design and improve the process. That is not the day-to-day manager. I work with a lot of banks who have 1,000 branches. You can't have every branch manager changing the process when you have a consistent set of ways that you have to do things. So what you have to have is some place for those ideas to go to be reviewed. I call this process stewardship. I avoid the word process owner, by the way. I don't think anybody owns the process. We gave up on data ownership 20 years ago. We called them data stewardship. And it really is, that person is acting on the best behalf of everybody to pull it all together. Ownership implies control, and it's got to be collaboration and coordination. So, but anyway, this role will coordinate all of these and come up with a better process so that we're constantly improving overall. But sometimes the process we're working on is affected by other processes. How many processes have you seen where the problem is we're sourcing bad data? So everything coming in is really terrible, and we're doing all this extra work because of what we're receiving. So I'm now going to have to coordinate with other process stewards and put the whole governance mechanism in place. Now this is sort of a level 4 maturity picture. And you're going to maybe have to work your way up there in order to get there. But I think it's an important picture. So what we're saying is, if you're at sort of level 2, 3, the kind of governance you can expect is governance over compliance. Did I meet the standards? Have I done everything according to the way it's supposed to look? And so on. It tends to be like that. But it's a starting point. You've got to start somewhere. If I get up to sort of level 3, I can now talk about governance of change. So if we look at all the processes that are out there, which are the ones that should be improved? As opposed to the way it is today, each manager comes in and says, I want, give me a project, give me budget, give me money, fix this, fix this, fix this. But maybe that's not strategically the right thing to work on, even if it isn't working well. There's some things that don't work well. It doesn't make much difference to the outside world. There's other things that don't work well, which are incredibly important to the outside world. Those are the things I want. So basically then, I can start with change. And then ultimately, and by the way, this is sort of happening at level 3 maturity. Level 4 maturity is 4 to 5, is now I use performance data to make my decisions about where should I invest for change. And it's not about asking for IT money or asking for new resources. It's outside of the process. You use the process to actually manage what you're trying to accomplish. So along with this then, there's a whole governance framework. Along with the maturity, there's a governance maturity. So all the way from isolated, where everybody does whatever they want to do, all the way up to it's integrated or aligned, and I can sustain myself. So the governance goes along with that. I'm not going to say too much more about that. I just want to spend a bit more time on the next thing. This is a critical page for all of you. If you have this, good luck. Because what happens here is, at the bottom here, I sell, manufacture, I deliver, it goes to the customer. There's a bunch of measures and targets for that, right? In the meantime, I've got all these different executives in different departments being measured on something else. Being measured on something else, right? And as a result of that, no one, if these measures here are fighting those measures there, you're not going to get the behavior change and the culture change and the process change you're looking for. This is one of the number one things to work out. But it's really, really hard to do if you're level 1 mature. So you have to use the right approach for the level of maturity that you're at, and gradually move that elastic up over a period of time. So a little bit about communication, and then I'll summarize. So basically here then, some sort of communication program which goes something like this. First of all, there are people who are affected by the change. You better understand who they are, and you better understand what it is that might concern them. So what are their concerns? What do they think might happen to them with regard to all this change? So if you know what the concerns are, then you can basically craft the messages and have the right communication anticipating those concerns. You don't wait till somebody has a problem. You anticipate the problem and make sure you've got the right design, of course, but also make sure you have the right message so everybody is giving the same message as to why we're doing it and so on. What media will I use? Will I send emails? Will I put up a special web page for it? Will I bring people into a room? You have to think about what combination of media we use. When and how often is a very, very good question. Because the other thing is, you can't tell them once. You have to tell them over and over and over and over again. And you have to be consistent with your message. Because as soon as you're inconsistent, everybody stops believing you because they think you're making it up. Who is going to send the message? This is a really good one. One of the things I found is that some of the best messengers are the people who hated it the most at the beginning. The people that everybody looked at them and said, oh, he's with this. There must be something to this, right? The biggest resistors sometimes are your best messengers. But be careful. Make sure they really are ready. Otherwise, it's a big, big risk. And you want to create agents of change and so on. So it really goes through this model. This is called the concerns-based adoption model. I like it very, very much. What it says here is, and this is the sequence that people go through. It says, first of all, you have to tell them what it is. If you cannot describe what the change is going to be to move into a process-centric approach, you can't describe that. How are you going to get anybody with you? So what is it? The next question you have to answer is, okay, how is this going to affect me? And this is all about me, 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 me. It's not about you, it's about me. It's not about them, it's about me. I don't care about the customers if I don't think I've got a job. Right? Is this fair? It's about me, 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 me. And that's not being selfish. And by the way, the executives are very much about me, 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 me. My bonus, my incentive, my power, my control, my influence. It's all about that. It's even worse with the executives, right? By the way, the executives are very good at saying we'll change things because we're going to change what happens to everybody else. You know what we're talking about now? We talk about process management, implementing that. We're talking about the processes of the managers. Now they're the ones who are going to be affected by all this. Maybe rather than 8 levels of management, we're going to have 3. Or, as we've seen recently, there's an organization in the US called Zappos, Zappos.com. They're the largest retailer of shoes, all kinds of shoes. Zappos just told their staff, very, very soon, we are now going to a self-managed organization. There will be no bosses. There'll be no supervisors. You'll work completely as teams. And the interesting thing is, it has scared a lot of people. But they've given those people the option of leaving because they want the culture of collaboration and cooperation working all the way through. Now, it doesn't mean they're abandoning everything. There's a very well-defined way of working. And those models do work exceptionally well in the right organizations. But just as an example, that's going to scare a lot of people. And you have to be really, really good at your messaging. But it's all, why does it scare them? It scares because they're worried about themselves. It's not about, oh my gosh, will the customers like this? No, they're not even thinking about that. They're thinking about, what is it going to mean to me? I've got two children in university. I'm still paying a mortgage. Will I be able to do it? Will I have to move to a new job? There's all this doubt that people have to go through. You have to be able to answer those questions. If not, if you can't answer that, you will not get to the next one. The next one is, okay, what about you? You're making all this change happen. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Is there any credibility in your capability of making this work? And if you've done 5 things like this before and they all failed and it was a disaster and everybody hated it, they're going to go blah, 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 watch it all go by. They're not going to listen to you. You have to earn the respect of the people who are going through the changes. Now, the next one is, now, what about the customers? What about the suppliers? Now I can worry about the why. But what happens quite often is we get in there and we say, this is going to be fantastic. We're going to grow the company. We're going to expand into 5 new territories. It's going to be great for the shareholders, and we're going to make all this extra profit. And they're sitting there going, blah, 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 lose my job, blah, 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 blah. That's what they're hearing, right? And so you have to get them through the other one. This is counterintuitive. Yes, you have to tell them why it's important. If you don't deal with them, you're not going to get through the change. Okay? It's going to be extremely important. Now, after this, now I have agents of change. Now they can help with everybody else. And now I really have full collaboration at the top. This is a really, really important communication page when it comes time to doing all this stuff. This is going to be a tough, tough journey for all of us, for sure. Okay. So let me just conclude on this. For the executives, one of the things you have to do is you're going to have to give them some data about why this works and does it really work. Because it is very, very scary to them. And we talked before about risk, right? This issue of risk. I made a note of that because one of the biggest reasons is that managers and executives believe that the risk of change is greater than the risk of staying the same. And if the pain of staying where you are is greater than the pain of change, then you're okay. So sometimes it's better to have a big mess on your hands, and it's easier to move through this. We saw this with one of the things I skipped by, which was Boeing with their C-17 aircraft. They were almost out of business in 1994. And what happened with that organization was they only had one customer, U.S. military, and the U.S. military said, we're canceling the contract. When your only customer says we're canceling the contract, that will get your attention, right? So they had to make drastic changes, and they did. But they used that to get everybody on the same page. They used that to their advantage to say, look, there is no choice here, and the executives included. And they went to a completely 100% process-managed organization. Their process architecture is their org chart. It's their org chart, and so we have managers now accountable for process results, which are important to the customers and the other stakeholders of the organization, completely in sync, okay? So this is just a page to look at that. I mean, look at this one here. According to the survey by these guys, it says effective end-to-end process management, 42% faster in delivering revenue growth and 28% more efficient as organizations. That's what you got to hit executives with. If you're in the supply chain type of business, there's all kinds of data that show companies who follow supply chain process properly completely outperform those who don't. That data is important. That I can sell to the top of the house, right? So that's going to be quite important for us. And the other thing we start to see, and coming back to the maturity model we're talking about here, is if I'm at the bottom of this, what can I aim for? I can aim for simplification. I can aim for reducing costs, reducing waste, faster cycle time on the transaction. Very operational types of things to look for. As I move up, I can expect to get optimized resource utilization, better quality, better and responsive decision making. I could talk about that for hours as well. by the way, I really believe all decisions happen inside processes. Like, should I approve you for a loan? That's a process which makes the decision, which uses business rules. And for those people who are doing modeling here, the little diamond is not a decision. It is not a decision. The decision is made in the process which precedes the diamond. Make sense? Don't ever put your business rules in the diamond. Put them in the process. The diamond just tells you where to go next. Okay? All right, sorry, I had to say that. I feel much better now. Okay. So, and then as I get to the top of the maturity curve, I can expect to be more innovative, faster time to market, avoid things, improve response to market. So these are the benefits of becoming more process mature. These are the benefits of doing that type of thing. Okay. So last page here, very colorful, a very, very colorful page. What this really says is how do you put it all together and why are processes so important to help you? Really, there's a number of things at the beginning here. This is all about strategy. It's all about the strategy. It says here, there's external influences. What's happening with the euro versus the US dollar? What's happening with the Portuguese economy? What's happening to technology? What's the government doing? What's happening in the European government versus the Portuguese government? Like, those are all things, you can't do anything about that. But you better understand it. Because that pressure, those external influences, and by the way, they might be good for you, the green ones versus the red ones. I need to know that. I also need to know what is important to my customers. What are the real needs and expectations of the customers? You want to avoid the type of thing that Henry Ford said a number of years ago. He's dead now, of course. But what Henry Ford basically said back in the 1920s, he said, if I had asked my customers what they really wanted and I gave it to them, I'd be now making faster horses. Okay? The real need was for transportation. Think about Steve Jobs. No one asked for an iPad. No one wanted an iPad. They didn't even know what it was. But as soon as it came along, they realized, oh, yes, I have a need for this. So the organization look at the true needs of the outside world and bring those needs and expectations in. These things influence your business strategy, and if you combine them together into a very few simple statements, we call it the North Star. You put them into like 5 statements, say these are the 5 things we aim for, then all the rest of the work you do can be very simply compared to those 5 statements. As opposed to the pages and pages and pages of strategy documents, each organizational manager interprets it the way they want to. Okay, so that's a bit of a challenge. So now from this, I can actually determine what are my processes. Now, because every process starts with an outside person and comes back around to them again, you look at all the stakeholders, all the interactions, and discover all the processes. And it's not about your org chart, remember that. So now I've got a good set of processes. I can define my measurement based upon my strategy and based upon my processes. I can measure those. Out of that, I can figure out what capabilities do I have to have, and I can manage those as a complete set of capabilities in the business architecture. From those, I can then figure out where should my priorities be, what are the most important things to work on from a business overall point of view. And then I can implement my transformation program. And then I can manage by process, and then I'll hit my targets, then I'll see my results. This is sort of how process sort of connects the front to the back and keeps everything in sync. So that's what I have to say, and I'll be happy to talk to you as the rest of the day goes on. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. This is hard work. This is really, really hard work. But you have to be patient, take your successes. Sometimes you'll make some great successes for a year, and then some executive comes in and brand new and says, what's all this nonsense? And you're going to struggle to re-educate, and so you have to be there for the long run. And I really don't think there's any choice. I think this is going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. It's like the Industrial Revolution. That happened. It took a long time. This is going to take longer than you think. But if your organization is ready, go for it and take advantage of it. Thank you very much.